Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's class. So this week we'll be treating poetry. We'll be going into poetry of treated prose and drama. So now is the third genre of literature. That's poetry. So these are just the list of our objective for the class. Is just basically to um, look into what poetry is and then to differentiate between traditional and modern poetry and then examine the oral and written forms of poetry. That's what this class will entail. So, um, poetry, as we all know, because I know that this is not like a foundation class, we just know that um, it's like a refresher kind of. So, poetry is a literal form that emphasizes expression of feelings and ideas using distinctive style and rhythm. That's poetry is not like prose, it's not like drama. You're just trying to, though they have similarities, because in every writing form, you're trying to express your thoughts, you're trying to express your feelings. But then now in this case, it's been structured. You express yourself using a particular pattern. That's where this distinctive style and rhythm comes in play now. So also um writing poetry, you use figurative language a lot, and we use meter and sound devices to evoke the emotion of the people, evoke emotion and imagery. So the people that are reading the poem, because poetry is a poem, you understand? So you're trying to use figurative language to make them understand what you're saying. Understand? And then in form of meter now, meter is just a rhythmic structure or a way the lines of poetry is arranged. You arrange it using stressed and unstressed syllables. So unlike prose, poetry is structured in lines and standards. That's it. No, we treated prose. We said one of the main um, elements of prose is that it has paragraph. This paragraph helps you really understand like some ideas the writer is trying to pass across. So in terms of poetry now, instead of paragraph, there are standards or not standard stanzas. So the basic elements or structures of poetry, we have meter, we have rhyme, or you can say rhythm, we have stanza, we have verse, and we have scheme. So like I said the meter is just to describe, it's just a way of describing a rhythmic structure. That's the arrangement of stressed and unstressed syllables. That's what a meter is. Then for rhyme, we all know what we can tell what a rhyme is now. So you're trying to make words that sound alike. You're trying to put them side by side, or even though it's not side by side, maybe each line will carry similarities, kind of same words. Then we have stanza. Stanza is just like replacing paragraph. Instead of using paragraph in poetry, we use stanza. That is just a series of line. Let's say to explain it better, it's a series of line that is arranged together. You arrange those line, and those line, mind you, they are all represented with like they are all um if with a particular style. That's that meter. You arrange them using a particular style, because you cannot just say you write the poem, or poetry is not written anyhow. You understand? Then verse can be the whole poem or just a line. You're just like um a whole metric line of a poem is can be called a verse. Then a scheme. A scheme is just the pattern, the pattern of a poem. We have different types of poems, and there are different ways their their rhyme, the way they rhyme, the way their rhyme scheme is. So that's what scheme is all about. It's just the way poems or the lines of poems are arranged to suit each other. So now we'll move to traditional poetry. Now, talking about something traditional, we're not really trying to um create anything about some African or non-African. We're just trying to say something that is traditional, like something that is past or something that was before used. You understand? So traditional poetry just refers to poetry that have been around for a long time. It typically follows a specific structure. So example is sonnet. We have sonnet, we have haiku, we have binali, and we have ballads. So traditional poetry, when they say they have been around for a long time, yes, let's say they are the foundations of poetry. How how poetry were written when people started writing, times of William Shakespeare and all of that. So we're just trying to say how these people, the kind of structure or the pattern they followed in writing their poems makes up traditional. That what traditional poetry is all about. So now it uses consistent rhyme scheme and meter. That's if you are writing a poem, like let's say in at the time of William Shakespeare and the likes of him, you don't go outside a particular pattern. You must follow this pattern. Just for example, now um you have like the way we follow our course outline. So that is the way you follow the structure for writing traditional poems. Then the themes always include love, nature, heroism, and morality. So we pass through generations with cultural or religious functions. So an example of traditional poetry is William Shakespeare's Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? So this poem is a sonnet. And a sonnet is a poem that has 14 lines that is divided into four subgroups. That's made up of three quatrains and a couplet. That doesn't mean that all traditional poems are sonnet. No. It's just saying that most of it were sonnets. That's to tell you that they were either 14 lines or 12 lines or 4 lines or 3 lines. You understand? So they're just trying to tell you that if maybe the kind of poem you're writing falls into this group, you will know you cannot see any poem that will be like it's 14, it's 15 lines or 16 lines because that was out of the structure. You understand? So most traditional poems follow this structure. If they are sonnet, they are always 14 lines. And these 14 lines must always come in three quatrains. That's three standards of 4 lines. That's what a quatrain is. A quatrain is a stanza that has 4 lines, 4 line stanza, and this 4 line standard stanza must appear in three parts, and then the closing poem will be two lines. So I have like so this slide now is showing you what what I'm talking about now. So you see, I don't know if you see this part. There is group where there's heroic quatrains. So you see From shall I compare thee to a summer's day to the part where we have a summer's lease at all too short a date. So that is one quatrain. That is one quatrain. That is 4 lines. I made up that stanza. So we now move further to the next stanza of 4 lines. That's the second quatrain. And then we move to the last stanza of 4 lines. That is the third quatrain. And then we have couplets. So I was talking about a scheme. That's the basic element of poetry. So now you can see where it's written A B A B C D C D E F E F G G. So it's just trying to tell you the scheme. Scheme actually follows a particular pattern of alphabets. Now this one that is A, if you can check the last alphabet there, that last word there has an alphabet. The last alphabet now is what is making that scheme A. So the next one now, the last word there does not have the same alphabet. That is why it now changed to B. So if you watch it closely, you see that anyone that has the same alphabet at the last word, they take the letter. It's following a particular rhyme, following a particular rhyme scheme. So the rhyme scheme is what makes up this alphabet you are seeing. Rhyme is what makes up a scheme of a poem. That's why most times we call it rhyme scheme. So now move on to I just wanted like this poem. I just put it here so that you understand what traditional poems are really all about. So they actually follow certain patterns, and anything outside this pattern has actually like fallen out of the line of poetry. For anything that falls into traditional poetry, it must follow a pattern. You understand? And this is the pattern for traditional poetry. Now, modern poetry. So when you talk about modern poetry, you definitely know that is things that are out of the traditional structure. That they broke the traditional rules. They were more experimental and free form. That's to say, there was no particular structure. There was no particular rhyme scheme or meter. You understand? You can like you were I would like the way we use the word now, freestyle. You can freestyle. Rewrite it as it comes to your mind. That's what traditional poetry is all about. So it's more of like a freestyling. That's why I say free form. It focuses on personal experiences, definitely, inner thoughts, and contemporary themes. Contemporary themes, that is things that actually happen with the modern society and the modern world. So it often lacks regular rhyme or meter. That's the way this one now. You can see that okay, there's something that is forming A B A B C D C D. So with modern poetry, there's nothing like that. You hardly see all those kind of rhyme schemes. So it emphasizes on imagery, symbolism, and innovation. So an example of modern poetry, we have this poem here. So if you check closely on what I was saying, see that this poem is a poem of 11 lines. It didn't follow any structure there. And if you check, trying to look for a rhyme scheme, this poem does not even have any rhyme scheme. It's just like the writer's thoughts, putting down his thoughts in to just decide to play on his thoughts. You understand? Play with his thoughts and write it just the way he's feeling. Just the way we said here that it focuses on personal experiences and it's more experimental. So more experimental in the sense that as the words come into your mind, you just write them down. You're not trying to follow any particular pattern. No rule is binding whatsoever you're writing. That's what modern poetry is all about. When you just hear modern poetry, the first thing that should get to your mind is just free form, or some people call it free verse. If you come across that word, you know that okay, that's what modern poetry is. Modern poetry is more of free verse. than um, the traditional poetry. So now we'll move to oral poetry. Just as the name, oral. Anything oral is something that is vocal. You get. So it's composed and transmitted verbally. You understand? So most times some poets, they compose these their poems and they want it let's say acted out or is said out. It includes chants, songs, epic, and performance poetry. Yes, there's performance poetry. Mime can fall under that category. So it's common in traditional African societies, this oral poetry. Because when you see things like songs and chants, what comes in mind is just the African society because that's more of what we do, our chants and our songs. So if you can write down these songs or chant, you see that they actually follow a kind of they have a kind of form or a structure. That's why they fall under poetry. You understand? So it relies on repetition, rhyme, and audience interaction. So audience interaction in the sense that as these songs are sung, definitely there are people to listen to them. Or these chants per se, they are definitely set to the hearing of people. That's why they are verbal. Um, Now, written poetry. Written poetry now, just as the name, is definitely in written form. And most times, the poet can choose to publish it or he can choose not to publish it. Uh, so it allows for careful editing and complex structures. Yeah. So both the traditional poetry and the modern poetry, definitely, if it falls under this written category, you know that you cannot just write for writing's sake. You understand? You have to, whether it's modern or whether it's tradition, it must follow the basic structure of poetry. That's it must have a meter, it must follow have a scheme, even though most times modern poetries, their scheme is actually blank. That's why you I don't know if you come across some words like blank verse. Most of these blank verse don't really have rhyme schemes. So, but then if I'm coming under the written form of poetry, they must follow at least the basic structure, basic elements of poetry. That it must see rhyme, they must be meter or stanza, just the basic form. Either you see one or two of these elements in a written form of poetry. So written poetry is accessible to wider audiences over time. So, the works of William Shakespeare, just because it was written, that's documented. That's why we have access to his works. So just imagine if it was just in oral form, he say it was just something that he was saying all the time or he sang all the time. Let's say over the years or the century, how many century ago, it will just be, let's say, even though people remember, even if okay it was carried from generation to generation, there will be a point where either a line or two from those his poems will be missing out. You understand? Just because, let's say, because of memory's sake, most times people don't really remember things as okay the first time they heard it. But just because these things have been written down, they have been able to be, things like um when they say okay this thing now have been republished, and it gets passed on from generation to generation just because it was written. So written written poetry may lose performative elements found in oral traditions, definitely, because there's no way you want to, it doesn't have the element for performance because most times they're all written down and it's just to be read. by um the people who have interest in them. So at this point now, we know that we've established that poetry is a unique form of expression, trying to combine meaning and musicality. Yeah, because you're trying to like give expression to your thoughts. And then the musicality comes in now where there is rhyme or rhythm per se. So you're trying to give expression to your thoughts in mixing it up with a bit of rhyme to actually make it more meaningful to the audience or more entertaining per se. So traditional and modern poetry differ in structure, as we've established. It differs in structure, in theme, and in purpose. So oral and written forms each have unique strength and cultural importance. So for the oral form of poetry, the importance, of course, it was important to the people. That was how they were able to, they felt they were able to keep their traditions, they were able to pass it on to their children through the songs, through the chants, through the way because when you could talk about some epic heroes, because a theme in poetry is heroism. So they use all these songs per se to talk about some of these their heroes, warriors or kings. Understand? That's why it's kind of different. It has its own unique function. The oral poetry and the written poetry both have their own unique function.